Welcome to the Kitcar History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff. A lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved and what happened to them. Hi, welcome to the Total Kitcar YouTube channel. My name's Steve Holt, editor at TKC MAG and totalkitcar.com, and time for another Total Kitcar History File series video. Delighted this time. A gentleman who I had, a late gentleman I have to say, sadly, who I knew, did a few features with him back in the day. Always got on very well, and he really was a gentleman and a gifted, go so far as to say a proper genius. The name of that person is William Towns. I think from memory we've got quite a few videos on now, and they don't always necessarily follow, a bit like Eric Morecambe. They're all the right notes, not necessarily in the right order. They don't actually come out in the order that we record them. So I've learnt to my cost not to say, oh yeah, the one before this one, because people say, hang on a minute, that's not that one. So I don't even bother now. So I think I'm right in saying this is the first week. I promised some on great designers that touched our industry. I think, I could be wrong, unbelievably it has been known, that we've not done a designer before. So this is a great pleasure that William is the first one. Incidentally, it was always William, never Bill. Some of these classic car journalist types think they were clever and they knew him and they didn't, and they called him and they refer to him as Bill Towns. All no, verboten, absolutely verboten. That was his charming wife Elizabeth would always rebuke a transgressor on that front. Actually, talking about some of those classic car journos are okay. They don't just look down at us kit car types with disdain anymore, which I could never understand anyway. But anyway, there you go. So let's move swiftly on. William he set up William Towns Limited in 1977, and he traded under the name of Interstyle. That is Inter, S-T-Y-L. But let's go wind it right way back. We'll come to all that. He was born in 1936, and his family were well into their cars. His father had a Jaguar SS100, I think, and his mother an MGTD. And in fact, one of young William's first cars was a Rolls Royce. I know not which model, but it was certainly a Rolls Royce. He went to work for the Roots Group in 1954, where he told me that he largely worked on seat and door handle designs. He had to cut his teeth somewhere. He actually did mention a list of cars that had his door handles on, which made me chuckle. He did actually have a big list as well, but I can't find any of those notes. I mean, we are talking nearly 40 years ago, so perhaps I could be forgiven for that. It's irritating because I like detail, intimate details on these companies and designers and such like, and people, and it annoys me when I can't find those last little bits that I need. One of his colleagues, actually, when he worked at Roots, he was working on the Hillman Hunter, where one of his colleagues was another hugely talented car designer, and one that's touched our game, and that was Professor Tony Stevens, another gifted gentleman as well. He moved on to Rover in 1963, where one of his biggest successes, I guess, was designing the body for the Rover BRM gas turbine project that was headed up by David Bash. And that car raced at Le Mans in 1965. And then in the following year, 66, William joined Aston Martin, primarily again on seat design, but his rise was pretty meteoric there. And he famously designed the DB, had input, definitely major input on the DBS, and input on the Vantage V8, and he certainly designed the first edition of the Lagonda. And that car really was I suppose now would be regarded as a trendsetter. And certainly for Williams' type of design, which he liked to call razor edge. If you look at his designs, he did like a sharp angle, and certainly Lagonda set the tone for that, for what came after, really. And indeed, William, I keep trying to say Richard, I don't know why. William was always partial to a gadget, and it's no surprise that Lagonda had wild computerized digi, put teeth in Steve, digi-dash arrangement that for its time was really futuristic. Ultimately, I don't think it worked very well, but it was futuristic. I think it was really the fact that I think Williams' design was perfectly good, but I think the engineers couldn't really get it to work successfully, I don't think, for whatever reason. And as I mentioned earlier, he set up his own company, Interstyle, in 1977, just to enable him to do his own thing, really. Other things that came up back then were obviously the GS Europa was a project that he worked with Mike Rawlings on, and GS Cars in Bristol, who really commissioned that car or funded it for sure. I remember the first time I visited William's house, the Park Farm Estate in Compton Vernay in Warwickshire. I think it was 1984, and I was only 22 then. I found it a revelation. I mean, I was a council house boy, and to go to a house like that, it was something else. I didn't know anyone who lived in such a house, actually. And maybe I still don't, but definitely at that time, it was a beautiful property. It appeared to me, as a South Londoner, it was like a stately home. Anyway, Elizabeth was a superb hostess, and truly, I would say, truly amazing. There was William had two studios downstairs where he created his designs, and I think they were distinct from each other, so he didn't just go into the one he fancied. I think one was used for one particular project, and the other one on another, or for another company who doing commissions for. I think one of them was for his own designs, and the other one was for the commissions that he received. And they actually poured in quite a lot on regularly. And it wasn't just on cars either, and we'll come to that. I remember my dear old mate Pete Coxhead, the late Pete Coxhead. We were sitting in his study once, and William suddenly became very distracted, and he rushed to his bifold doors that looked out over his beautiful estate, with a lake at the bottom of that estate, sort of towards the end, past a field and some beautiful landscaping there. He grabbed a pair of binoculars, and he had mounted on a tripod in front of his large bay those windows, which was next to his collection of instruments. I think there was a couple of bass guitars there that he used to amuse himself with. And he noticed, I think he'd once offered free fishing tickets to anglers, local anglers, but by the time of that visit, I think that particular time I was about 1986, he'd recently begun charging, and William was always aware that people were bunking in and fishing the well-stocked water for free. And I remember he used a walkie-talkie to dispatch someone to collect the naughty fisherman's fee, on a Hustler amphibious vehicle, of course, which it had to be. Anyway, his study was a real man cave, well before that term was first uttered, I think. And he had plenty of toys in it. And in addition to the bass guitars, I think there was a keyboard and a drum kit. I think the latter, the drum kit, was played by his son, one of his sons. I think he was also a handy musician as well, William, hence the bass guitars, really. In fact, that house, there were three firsts in my life that occurred when I first went to William's house. To this day, I've never set foot in a carpet in a home with a deeper shag pile carpet. It was so deep, it was beautiful. We had to take our shoes off, of course, and you couldn't see your feet. It was just fantastic. It was a wondrous thing, and it really was plush and really lovely. It also remains the only house that I have been to where the lady of the house banged a gong, and I mean no Mickey taking on this. It was genuine. It's the only house I've been to where someone has banged a gong to announce that luncheon was ready, and I found that I was just transfixed. It was beautiful. Remember, we made. I had to be careful, as I say, as a boy from South Norwood, sitting at a beautifully presented table. If I had soup, it usually came out of a Heinz tin that my mum had got from the local shop, and was always usually tomato in flavour. This one wasn't. I can't remember what it was. It might have been broccoli and Stilton, which worries me that I remember that. But I remember it was unbelievable. And I'm not sure how many acres William had at his disposal at the Park Farm estate, but I imagine it was well into 3 digits. And then when lunch was finished, he basically got us to follow him on foot to one of those buildings, and he had in there. I think there was a collection of quad bikes, and he said, right. He just tossed us the keys to one each and said, follow me. So off we went out into the estate, I guess into a larger outbuilding further away that had examples of most of the vehicles that he designed, which I thought was fantastic. And that, of course, was a day that he also got his helicopter out, and we hovered up not very high in the sky and took photos. We arranged Pete arranged the vehicles that were on display. There's some famous photos. In fact, Neil's got one of them here for your delectation and delight, of some shots from that very session. And again, wondrous time. It was like the best day of my life at that time, I think, almost. And I think he had I don't script these, much to your surprise. And I think he had an off-road course where we were allowed to play with those quad bikes, which is good fun. But he was always a charming host, and nothing was ever too much trouble. And indeed, it was him, I think, that suggested that we arrange and how we arranged his vehicles in front of one of the sheds. And each one had a story. And there was also some of his other stuff outside. And it did take ages to set it all up, but he was meticulous, and that's the way he has the secret of his success, really, as well as him being a genius. Yeah, we had to drive or drag the ones that weren't under their own power out and move them about. It was hilarious, really. But the sheer variety of William's stuff, it is the sheer variety of what he did. You know, from Aston, let's just mention some other non-hustler ones. There was the Aston Martin Bulldog, which he really liked, and that car's come back into get mainstream press recently. It's been restored, and the current owner, I think the original owner's son, has been sort of taking it around various exhibitions and shows, and that's a fantastic thing as well. So there was the Aston Martin Bulldog. There was he designed the Alpha style. That was, if you remember, and you were around in the scene back in the mid-80s, there was, we think body conversions are something new. They certainly aren't. There was a couple of companies, Alpha style being one of them, that offered a body conversion for the Alpha 33. And William designed one of those before sorting that project on. And I think it was a very pretty thing, actually. I was a bit partial to a Sud, and I had a 33. I had two 33s over the years. I had a standard 33, and I had a sport wagon, which I really liked that car. Lagonda DBS we've mentioned. There was a thing called the Black Prince. We'll come to that in a minute. The GS Europa I've mentioned. There was the Geisen E12, which was based on a Jaguar E-Type. Jensen Healy Microdot. The TXC Tracer, that's a 2-seat sports car that he had high hopes for, real high hopes. I don't think that ever came to anything. Rover BRM we've mentioned, and there was an intriguing little design called the Pizzazz with 4 Z's in it, which was a 205 GTI that he basically tickled with a little bit of a new front bumper, rear bumper, a couple of other body touches on it, and that was a pretty little thing, or clever little thing. but he had a real love for functional city vehicles way before the smart car. He really liked the Auto Duo, I seem to remember. He really rated that. But yeah, there was the town. I think the first one he did of that ilk was the Towns car, as it was called in 1973, which was quickly rechristened to the Minissima. Never have been able to say that properly. Minissima. And then about in 1973, and about 3 years later, he did the Microdot, which in the latter one, the Microdot was intended to be powered by an electric motor. And even then, I remember sitting in his study and him telling Pete Coxed very seriously, intently, that he believed that fossil fuels would be superseded one day by electric power. And he spoke passionately about it. And that was 30 odd years before the advent of what we see in our showrooms today, really, I suppose, have become mainstream. One of his personal favourites was his Jensen Healey design. He really liked that. But also, well, there was a story behind each one he did, and each one had a real deep meaning for him, I think. And the Bulldog concept was for his former paymasters at Aston Martin was one that he was fond of. And I just suddenly flashed into my adult brain that the TXC Tracer, to which I mentioned, was actually an MGB, a proposal for a latter day MGB as well, which was interesting. Based on Metro, no less. He did a couple of later Reliance as well, the SS2 and the Scimitar Sabre. Also, that was interesting. There was a pair of cars for what was intended to be a resurrection of the Railton Motor Company, another old famous name. And he designed a pair of cars for them, which were based on Jaguar XJS convertible. There was the F28 Fairmile and the F29 Claremont. If I've got photos of those, you'll see them at some stage during this video that Neil will put up. But there was always something going on. He, as I said earlier, I've said a couple of times, he didn't just do vehicles. He was far from it. He was very proud of the street furniture that he designed for a variety of councils up and down the land, in high streets and shopping arcades. He created a rowing boat that was effectively a roof section from a Tony Bell high-top ice cream van of the day, and that was clever. There was I think a skidoo. There was all sorts. Then there was skip lamps. I mean, most people just think a skip lamp is a skip lamp. Not really. I mean, he spent lots of time designing what was a very fancy skip lamp. I think they actually went into production. They certainly replaced those horrible paraffin things that used to, well, not work and stink really. And there's a photo in that group shot of the cars. I think you'll see an example of some of those. There were public lavatories as well. One of them had a plumbed-in shower, so I'm not sure where that one went. And then he got involved in a range of clothing for his good friend David Rowan, and a couple of his buzzwords. He had lots of buzzwords. Functional clothing, and he was a keen supporter of Rowan stuff, which was functional clothing, and is still available indeed. So in case you don't know about the Rowan clothes, they were kind of interchangeable clothing, so you could unzip the trousers below the knee section and then zip on another pair or another below the knee section onto them to give you a different style or colour. Shirts and jackets that you could interchange the sleeves on, and it sounds terrible, but actually very, very functional. But let's now talk about the vehicle that really put him on our radar. So that kind of brings us to the Hustler range, the cars really that put him on our map. They were actually intended, the first one anyway, was intended as a special project for Jensen Special Vehicles that wasn't, for whatever reason, proceeded with. So William decided to do it himself under the Interstyle, as I mentioned earlier, STYL sub-brand, shall we say, of William Towns Design. Should also mention that prior to the National Kitcar Motor Show set up at Stoneleigh in Warwickshire, William and Elizabeth with Philby had his hands in it as well. He helped them put on a little garden party bash at Compton Venet on the Park Farm estate. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant little events. And they led directly to the National Kit Car Motor Show being set up. That was in sort of late 70s, early 80s. It ran straight into, was the first Stoneleigh, 81, 82, from something like that. I'm sure there'll be someone on here that will know that for sure. Such a long time ago. But anyway, the Hustlers were really clever. Full of Williams' angular lines that he so loved. They sure didn't excite everybody, but to dismiss them, and the people that liked them loved them, and understandably so. And under the skin, they were a work of art, which we'll talk about shortly. But I always remember I used to ring William up, and he wasn't one of these sort of designers that couldn't possibly get their hands dirty, darling, or whatever. He was often changing a gearbox or an engine or something in one of his Hustlers. But it was his engineering prowess as well as his design skill which set him apart, I think. For example, the Hustlers, if you get a chance to look under the skin of one of those and just look at the design rather than just the shape, they had a very clever upper and lower chassis frame system which kind of sandwiched the body panels, literally sort of clamped them in place. But the upper sections carried the glass sliding doors, most had sliding doors, windscreen and tailgate, while the lower frame enabled literally, this is the clever bit, any engine, although he specified what the preferred engine choice, and donor of course, but the customer could literally fit any engine in any configuration, which kind of encapsulates the genius of the man, I think. And again, one more of his buzzwords, he called it pick and mix, and I think that was quite a good way to describe it, really. But let's quickly run through the various Hustlers, and there's a lot of them, so I'll try not to dwell too long, because I realise we really want a 30-odd minute video as an ideal time. This one may run over slightly, so forgive me. But anyway, Hustler 4, 1979, that appeared. Did about 200 of them. That was the one that was the original concept design. That was the original design for Jensen Special Vehicles in 78. Apparently they couldn't afford to productionise it, was the reason. So William did it himself. And it actually, one of his Hustlers led the parade at that the first ever NEC motor show, I think, which was quite an interesting thing. Simple yet effective trademark towns. Here comes two more buzzwords. Razor edge styling. Based on Mini, that one. Did about 200 of them, I think. It was available for about 10 years too. Hobo came along in 1980, and he made one of those, surprisingly. That was a very Spartan type pickup style Hustler, based on Mini again. But it was very basic, and I thought he would have done more of them. Maybe nowadays he probably would. Hustler in wood. Now that one, there used to be a beautiful one of that used to sit on the banking by the main sort of show field at Stoneleigh. If you went to Stoneleigh, you undoubtedly be familiar with it. Lovely old fella. 70 of them were made. Came out in 1980. And it again showed his innovation, really. It made out of wood. It featured a marine ply. It was a marine ply monocoque, actually, with double glazing spec extruded aluminium frames around the edge. That actual wooden, I think I should really give the product, the wooden element, its full credit, really. It was actually a product called Aquaply, manufactured by a Gloucestershire-based company called Mallinson Denny (Lydney Limited). Don't know if they still survive. But what I was saying about liking detail, there you go. Not many magazines or whatever would be able to tell you that. If people called it Hustler Wooden or Wooden Hustler, he would automatically, instinctively correct them. He liked it called Hustler in wood. If you called it a Hustler Wooden, he would correct you. But that's kind of that, really. Some, you hear people saying, "Oh, in fact, if you've had one and you've driven one, I bet you've heard the people call it a greenhouse, and oh, can you grow tomatoes in that, mate?" I'd say 70 people didn't care and they ordered one, and good for them for that. Hustler 6 came along in 1981. He liked a six-wheeler, did William. In fact, most of the subsequent array of Hustlers could actually be ordered with the extra axle if you so wished. There were specific six-wheelers, but you could have, if you wanted a six-wheeled Sprint, for example, you could have one. It was similar in concept and mechanical base to the Hustler 4, but it had that second mini rear subframe to house the second axle or the second rear axle. You could actually carry 6 people in one, and a healthy payload. He always thought of farm use and agricultural use, did William. I think it was because of where he was based, and he could see their potential use for farm and agricultural purposes, really. The rear occupants, incidentally, sat 2 abreast sideways, facing each other, a la Land Rover, I suppose. Hustler Sprint was again a singular Hustler, 1981. This one was a sporty one, as he called it. He liked it, and I think he was. I think he was even. I do recall him describing it as a mini Audi UR Quattro. He was so into it and rated it so highly. That had a notable. It was notable for a bank of 6 concealed headlights, which were, and here comes some more detail for you, sourced from Mitsubishi Sapporo. Or yeah, several Mitsubishi Sapporos to give you 6 headlights. But anyway, there you go. The rest of the mechanicals were again standard mini, really, which is what he really liked. Followed the Sport. That was even more sportier. It did away with the slide. That one did away with the trademark sliding flat glass panels and was a 2-seater. But again, nobody was inspired enough to order one, really. Hellcat came along in 1982. That 50, just over 50 of those. That was a successor to the singular Hobo, even more basic, which probably was why it sold in bigger numbers. Hit the spot. For whatever reason, the Hellcat did catch on, or to the extent of 50. I think it was 54. Hustler Huntsman, there was a couple of those made. 1983 that appeared. That's an alternative to his mini-based Hustlers. William came up with an Austin 1100, Morris 1300, or even Metro based Hustler called the Huntsman. Had more of a purposeful stance during no small part to the larger wheels, I guess. Didn't prove popular though. Soon superseded by what came next. We're talking about the Force 4 or the Force 6 in 1984. 4 of those in total. That was, as I say, the direct replacement for the short-lived Huntsman. And again, he deleted the flat glass panels for that, and you could have conventional doors and wind-up windows. But I do remember those doors were massively heavy. And in fact, I told a lie there. The windows didn't open, but the doors were really heavy and you couldn't open the windows. I think that probably was off-putting for several people, perhaps. But you had your alternative Hustlers to choose from. Then came the Herdsman. That's an interesting one. That was the one that really was targeted at farm use, and in fact, he used one all the time on the Park Farm estate. Designed to tackle all terrains. Upper frame used the upper frame actually section of a Hellcat, but bespoke below. Didn't really catch on. Williams was very proud of it though, and as I say, he used it all the time around his estate. There was a singular amphibian, mainly used for collecting fishing fees on the Compton Vernay Lake. He actually went to Crayford Engineering, who collaborated with him on that one, based on an 8-wheel all-terrain vehicle. Skillfully, they adapted a Hustler 4 body. Yeah, it was a Hustler 4 body. And you could drive it on land and of course on water, and Williams tested the demonstrator regularly on his own lake. Harlequin I always thought was quite a pretty one. That was singular. 1985, same as a Force 4, but had more of an upright type grille and revised styling. And then I think comes my personal favourite, and I know it's a favourite of lots of other people too. The Highlander. That was the Jaguar XJ based limousine version of the Hustler, and it was aimed squarely at the Range Rover customer. And I think today I'm probably right in saying it's the most sought after of all the Hustler models. I think Williams demonstrator had a XJ12 base, I think, and that the 12-cylinder engine, and the chassis had to be beefed up because obviously, have you tried lifting the Jag diff? It's an XJ6 diff. It's colossal. And it was 5 meters long, I think. It was a huge brute. but something beautiful. I don't think we recognised or realised how good that was at the time it was around. Really, I think the Highlander really stacks up even now. Really, certainly well appointed. It had I remember it had a space age, typical William, Clarion stereo system mounted in the transmission tunnel, and one of his Lagonda style LCD dashpots, which I thought was quite good. Did a bit about 8 of those. Should have done much more than that, I think. Much more. And then came the Holiday, the Hustler Holiday, 1986, was probably, I think, definitely the last Hustler. That was probably the most radical looking. Had big flat glass panels, massive windscreen, and again you could use mini Metro, Austin 1100, Morris 1300. I think he was a Maestro maybe. Standard version of that had 6 wheels, but although you could order a 4-wheeler. A quick other Hustler related stuff really. There was the rowing-boat, I think I've mentioned that. There was the amphib, I've mentioned that. There was, he used to produce a lovely camping set to go with whichever Hustler model you had. That was beautiful, I thought. And it was typically functional William really. I'm not sure how many customers ordered them, but I think it was the ultimate accessory for your Hustler, I think. There was the golf buggy. Yeah, there was a Hustler golf buggy. Did a couple of those, I think. And I think that brings it up to date, really. Quick mention of the Black Prince. Now, that was a car. That was another old English brand, much like Railton that he got involved with. Black Prince went back, I think, 1919, just after the First World War. All of his designs were innovative, but some were just plain intriguing. That I think dates back to 1984, and he was commissioned to design a new Black Prince model. The original company was based in County Durham, and they produced a little air-cooled cycle car that had a plywood body clad in vinyl. But for his born-again version, William followed that same build structure, but used GRP for the wings. And a Reliant kitten as donor, along with its dual-like 750cc aluminium engine. Never really grabbed my attention, that one, but and I don't think it ever came to anything really. I do recall the prototype appeared for sale at Stoney a few years back, out of the blue, which intrigued a lot of people. There's lots of people really respected and admired William, and as they should have done really. Customers seem to love him too. Some of those, he believed not only in city cars, but he believed in enabling less able-bodied people to get around in vehicles and enjoy their motoring, and so therefore he was well into that, like the Microdot and Minissima. And I think some of those Hustler models could be converted for wheelchair use, which I think was brilliant, quite successfully too. And I always remember, I've got a photo, I think Neil would have used it here, a lovely, very happy looking Irish chap with his old Renault estate, who'd driven all the way over to Warwickshire to collect his Hustler kit. And as you can see, it's lashed to the Renault for its journey home with what looks like rope, which I thought was fantastic. Always love to know whether he got that home or not. I think he came from somewhere near Limerick, according to that signpost just above him, but marvellous. And that was kind of typical. He was all things to all people really, and his customers loved him. And if you got that Hustler concept, you really got it. And yeah, much miss William. He died sadly of cancer in crikey, 1993, 31 years ago, as I record. See, there I go, dating my videos. That means this is 2024 when I'm recording this. So if you're hearing it in 2027 and you're thinking, hang on a minute, he died in 1993 and he says it's 31 years ago. Oh, his maths are out. That's why I've got to be careful of that really. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. As I've said before many times, and I've got to say it really, and I do apologise. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. It's free. It is totally free. 70% of you who stop by and listen to these videos, and thank you for doing so, just skip gleefully out. please could you just hit the subscribe button for me? Please, please, please. That would mean a lot to me. I mean, I think, but I can't mention sums because again they could be way out. But I'm amazed at how many people have subscribed. I'm so thrilled about that because when I was persuaded and nagged to do this, it was sold to me on the basis, not when I came up with the reason that okay, I grudgingly agreed to do it, but it'd be a great way of getting some of these marvelous photos that we've got in our archive out into the open world because they deserve to be seen. And as custodian of such an archive, I realise the legacy that's involved with that, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share some of these photos with you. So I hope you're enjoying them. But I never dreamt that we'd get more than 100 subscribers. I mean, if you know me, you know I'm not really a tech geek by any stretch of the imagination. I am proud to say I'm a bit of an analog dinosaur, and I'm happy with that. Other people can help me do the things I need to do in the modern age, so that's great. But I'm over the moon. But if you could subscribe, it's really great if you could. And also likewise, if you could hit that, even if you don't subscribe, hit the like button for me, because if you got this far you might have enjoyed it, and that's my reasoning really. So wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is, thank you so much for visiting and giving us up part of your time, a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. I look forward to welcoming you along to the next one. We've got lots of stuff planned, so look out for some more hopefully great content to keep you entertained. Over and out. Thank you very much.